Hey everyone, my name is Rob Phelan. I'm with the Choosify International Foundation, and I'm here with Jacob Wade from iHeart Budgets, and he's going to talk to us today about budgeting. So, Jacob, how did you end up coming to us with probably the most boring topic in personal finance?
Well, I figured people needed some material to sleep on, so we're going to put them right to sleep to talk about spreadsheets, facts, and figures.
So,
you
like,
know,
8, 9 p.m., like, turn this on, you're good? Okay.
oh man, if you're struggling sleeping, let's talk about budgeting. No, I mean, budgeting became a passion of mine. It was a funny story. I actually had a huge inheritance and a bunch of money when I was 18, which sounds like an amazing start. But I had no education. I had no idea what budgeting was. I had no idea what money management was. And I blew through it all in 2.5 years. And so that's one of the stories that when I started my website kind of like got passed around pretty quickly. They were like, look at this guy. But I mean, it was a humbling experience for me. I ran out of money. Then I got engaged. And then I was like, I should probably figure out how this works because it's not going to go well. So budgeting just became a passion of mine. Once I kind of got on a plan and started figuring it out, my wife and I got married and we were able to live on very little with an intentional plan. And then I started helping other people do that at the workplace, friends, family, the whole deal. And I just saw it unlocking people's lives. They felt very stuck and all of a sudden they saw all this possibility. So for me, budgeting just became a passion. And not the physical act of doing the dang thing, but what it gets you, the results, where it takes you. It opens up the world. So I'm passionate about budgeting.
Yeah, and like speaking of stuck, like you're one of the like least stuck people I can think of right now because you're currently like RV traveling around the country. How long have you been doing this for?
Yeah, so in 2018, we decided to do something a little different, and I quit my job. We sold 95% of everything we owned, including the house and our cars and everything. We got a truck and trailer and decided to start hauling our family around the country. So in August of 2018, we left, and a little over 2 years now. We're
Wow.
37 states in. We've hit at least 25 national parks. Like we're just rocking and rolling around the country. We're really enjoying ourselves.
And has budgeting been a big part of what's allowed you to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And as somebody that isn't FI, right, pursuing FI, but I realized that we had the ability to still enjoy the journey along the way toward being financially independent, right? So budgeting is absolutely required to make sure that we have everything we need, when we need it, how we need it. And so like, especially if you get on the road, I mean, you've probably seen them. You could spend $200,000-$300,000 just to get on the road, and then spend an insane amount of money to stay on the road. And so we wanted to be very intentional. And so being on a plan, I call it it's just a money plan, right? It's just a plan for the dollars that pass through my hands. So budgeting it would not have happened without our budgeting habits for the last decade leading up to this.
Okay. So that kind of brings me into the next thing, like budgeting. What is it? You just called it a money plan, which sounds a little bit more friendly than the word budget. I feel like when I think of budget, I think of things like diet, restrictive, no fun, like take everything away. The coffee's got to go. So yeah, what is a budget and what does it mean to you?
So a budget is simply just having a plan for the money that passes through your hands. So I think about it this way. On average, people in America earn about $50,000 a year. If you extend that over a 40-year working career, you might have over $2 million pass through your hands. All it is saying, if I have $2 million pass through my hands, I just want to make sure that money ends up in the places that I want it to and allows me to live the life I want. So a budget is just taking control of your money and saying, let's go live this life, right? Yes, it's within certain parameters. But the goal is to just like have a plan for that money that comes in instead of going to work, going to college, spending money to get a degree, and then spending 40 hours a week for the next 40 years and then hoping it ends up in the right place. That's just not a good plan. So a budget is just a simple money plan.
Okay. Yeah. And for all you kids at home, it's not a fun feeling when you get to 30 and you start thinking about your finances and someone mentions that, oh, by the way, you've handled about $500,000 so far. How much is in your savings account? And you're like, not $500,000. And you start realizing that like, oh, you've spent a lot of money and you don't really have anything to show for it. And that's where really being that intentional planner about, just how do you want to spend it? Like, where do you want that money to go? I think that's what it means for my wife and I. It's certainly not what can't we do? It's what do we want to do? And then how do we make that happen?
Exactly. Opportunity. It's what opportunities lie before me and can I go after these things versus, man, I hope someday, I wish someday. It's just turning that into a reality. I tell people a budget is basically just your dreams with a plan. That's all it is.
A roadmap to your dreams. I love it. Is there any other reason that a person might budget? Like, so say like we are that beginner 18-year-olds and we're just learning to manage money. Like, does their budget look different to a 30 something year old who's maybe knows a little bit more, but is still budgeting to kind of make sure I reach my goals?
Yeah, it's think of it as like habit building, right? So if you want to equate it with something like working out, like, hey, I'm going to go run for 10 minutes a day just to start, right? And even if you're starting small, you're not 30 mid-career, high salary, and then, have a house, independence, and all these other things. You're just getting started, but you're like, I want to build this habit now so that as more money comes in, as more responsibility gets added to my plate, I've already, like, it's just reactionary. Like, this is, I handle my money this way. This is how we make decisions. We're going toward these goals. So you're setting the habit of being intentional with the money you do have and where it goes, and the whole what gets measured gets managed idea. And then it's, you're building good money decision-making habits so that money decisions are so much easier to make because you've just been practicing that, even when you just get started. So yeah, even when you're like just coming out, or like whether you're going to college, or if you're going to go into trade or go right into work, just whatever comes through your hands, just saying, hey, here's sort of my box that I have. I've got this amount. And so now I can start setting maybe some of these smaller goals and start working toward these things. But you're building really, really good decision-making habits so that it's just a no-brainer later. And it's crazy because you think about it, like a ship has a rudder, right? And it's this massive thing moving in one direction. But if that rudder moves 1 degree, right? Think of your budget as like the rudder, just sort of steering yourself. Even if you just move 1 degree, you can end up thousands of miles in a more positive place if you're trying to head somewhere. So somewhere like financial independence, right? The Choose FI Foundation talks about becoming financially independent, and especially earlier in life. Well, if you can get that rudder to move 1 degree and you start moving toward financial independence when you're 18, instead of when you're 30 and you're like, oh, I should figure this out, like you are 10x above the game. It's crazy how even just these small habits built now can get you where you want to be so much quicker.
Yeah, and so many of the other videos in the series have talked about how those small incremental changes can really change the trajectory of where you're going. And I guess budgeting is one of those kind of the core places we go back to every single time. So we've talked about maybe saving in different parts of our budget. We've talked about making better decisions on housing, how to manage your credit better, but it really all comes down to this money plan. Like what is all your money doing? I guess one of the best pieces of advice I got when I was starting off was make sure every dollar has a plan. So every bit of money that comes in, what's its job? Is it going towards paying down a debt? Is it going to pay off a utility bill? Is it going towards a mortgage so you have a place to live? Is it going into savings? Because savings is still a job. Even though technically that money is still yours and it could be spent, we're saying, no, that's for another time. So that's going to be put aside. So that still kind of counts as an outgoing in most people's budgets. I guess you're kind of talking, and I guess we're both talking about tracking almost everything that we spend. Everything, like for me, I'm like, every dollar's got a job. At the end of my month, there is no money left in my checking account because it has all gone to its appropriate place. There's no just kind of like leftovers. There's no just like, oh, I covered all the important stuff. So whatever's left, cool, I can do what I want with that. Is that the way that we're supposed to budget, or are there different ways to budget?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, I mean, you mentioned it, it's called zero-based budgeting, but giving every dollar a job, a place to go. And I think where people get tripped up is they try to break down into all these minute categories, right? Somebody will have 50 categories. Oh, I spent this much on coffee, but I spent this much on restaurants. I spent this much on fast food. I spent this much. And it's like, some people can get overwhelmed with tracking and assigning money into all of these crazy buckets. So yes, you should be giving every dollar a job, and you should probably figure out where it's going. So you kind of know, okay, in general, my money's going in these areas. But if it's overwhelming, we've done a couple of things in our life where we just pared back. We just said, okay, we have one single bucket for what we call spending cash. That's like, I don't have to like, well, oh, can I swipe my card here because it's this type of restaurant in this type of location in my budget? But like those type of details can weigh you down, and those don't matter. And that's what people think of as like restrictive budgeting. It's like, no, just have a bucket of money. And, in general, you're going to spend about this much, right? But yes, you do need to have a budget, because it's like having a calendar. Like, if you wake up in the morning and you're like, I might show up to class, I might not, I don't know really when it is, but I hope it's there when I show up. Like, you can't do that in real life with your calendar or your school schedule or work. I hope work is there when I show up. Like, I hope, 3 p.m. is fine. Like, no, you got to have a set calendar and you manage your time. So the same thing happens with your money. You're just managing your money so that you don't hope something is there. You know exactly what's going on in and out. And again, I bring it back to, if you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars in 4 years going to college, and then the next 40 years spending 40 hours a week working, why are you doing that? You're not doing it for fun. You're doing it to earn an income. And so that income needs to be maximized and optimized instead of just sort of in and out and hopefully it works. Like, a budget is just saying, no, man, I'm gonna take advantage of the fact that I'm spending this time to do this. And then the side effect is eventually you don't have to work as long as most people because you were so intentional with your money. So yes, a budget, I would say, is required. It doesn't have to like weigh down your brain and make you obsessed with the spreadsheet, right? There's a guy named Ramit Sethi who talks about living life outside the spreadsheet. I'm all about that. Like, but you got to have some type of plan in place, or it will go away. I mean, there's trillions of dollars in marketing that make sure they can extract dollars from your pocket. So if you don't have a plan, it just does go away.
Yeah, and I guess the example you gave there, the calendar, really struck a chord with me. And I wasn't even thinking of calendars for like everyday living, but like if you go on a vacation, and my family is notorious for this. When I was growing up, we would go on a vacation, we would go to a destination, and then we kind of just wing it once we got there. And you might see some sites, you might not, because hey, you didn't bother to check what time they opened or closed, how much they cost, how far they were to get there. And then my wife's family, on the other hand, we turned up to like Boston, and there was like a 2-page itinerary of like, here's what we're doing every like 5 minutes of the trip. And I feel like those are kind of the two extremes. You could basically just wing it through life and hope that there's enough money in your account at the end of the month to kind of carry you through, or you go like very minute, like every cent is tracked and it's got a job and you know exactly where it's going. Or there's spots in the middle, like you can fall somewhere in the middle. You don't have to be one of those extremes, and somewhere in the middle is where you want to fall. And everybody's going to have a different preference in terms of how detailed they want to be.
Yep.
For my wife and I, like there are categories, and it's a bit more specific than just like spending, but at the same time, it's not like minute down to like very small things. Like we might have like house needs. We might have our son, you know, if he's got any things that are coming up, like toys, appointments, like anything that's basically related to him, we just give him a budget that if he runs out, sorry kid, you're all done. But no, if we have to spend more from a category, we borrow it from a different one. So it's basically like saying, all right, if you want to overspend in one spot, you just got to take it from somewhere else. So it's always a balancing game to make sure that there is still money, and kind of makes it a little bit fun. I sort of gamifies it. If it's possible to make budgeting fun, that's kind of where it is.
Yeah. Well, and there are some like good apps that help you do that. I'm a big fan of. I just do my stuff in Google Sheets because it just works, and I use it right on my phone. But there's a cool app called You Need a Budget that makes it real simple too, and it just tells you what to do. Like, oh, hey, you overspent here, just move it here. Cool, done and done. And yeah, just thinking of it as like a game, like I don't know, like building wealth as a game makes it so much more fun. And if you think about it that way, I'm not budgeting, I'm building wealth, right? I'm being intentional. I'm progressing and growing. And I'm just doing it within the parameters of what I'm making now. And then as my income grows, I just continue to be intentional. And all I'm doing is speeding up that wealth building strategy, which is way more fun than I can't drink lattes. Like, it's like, that's not what budgeting is about. Budgeting is about, it's just moving you towards the stuff you want to do, right? For us, we wanted to hit the road and travel the country. We wanted to see everything, right? And so we were like, okay, well, how do we do that? We don't just like go out and just sort of fall into the road and be like, let's hope we kind of get there. No, we pulled out the roadmap and we set our destinations and we map it and we see how long it's going to take to get there, right? And then money's the same thing, where you're gonna set your destination, right? Oh, I've got these goals, I want to get here. Okay, that's where you want to get to. well, where are you at now? Set your starting point. Okay, here is what's in my account. And then your budget is just like the GPS. It says turn left, turn right to get there to that goal. And if you find a shortcut, sweet, boom, we can get there faster. But you'll never do that with your money if you're not paying attention to what's going on with it.
Yeah, no, I think that's just spot on. Like that, the plan, guys, is what's going to help you to get to those goals. Like you could stumble your way onto them. Like it's possible that you take off for some very specific location in the country and you don't have a map. You just say, oh, we'll figure it out. You follow the sun or the stars or whatever you're thinking, and you somehow make it there. Like it could happen, but it's highly unlikely that you're going to make it to your goals without some sort of intention behind it and a structure for how that's going to happen, even if it is just a very vague one. Like you can do very general budgeting. Like I've heard of the 50-30-20 budget. Do you mind explaining what that is?
Yeah, so that one's really simple. They break it down just into 3 separate categories. So you have 50% of your money just goes toward your needs, right? So you say, okay, half my income is going to go toward just, rent and food and whatever those basic needs are. And then 30% goes towards things that you want, right? You're allowed to do that. Like, in fact, I encourage people, I've done budget reviews for people where I'll go in and add in a bunch of spending money. Cause I'm like, you guys, like you're going to hate your life if you don't go on a date and go do some entertainment, check out a concert, put the dang lattes back in the budget. And then the 20% is your savings. And so it's a really good targeted savings goal that's just saying, okay, think of it like a bill. This 20% just goes away, just like my rent. And I pay that every month, but then I've got just 2 big buckets I got to stick within. I got to set up my basic needs, and then I've got 30% that can go toward my wants. So if you want to really just break it down to super, super simple, you can just create those 3 buckets and you're budgeting at that point, but it's really easy.
Yeah, you're putting in guardrails to basically say, okay, when I am setting up my needs, so that does require a little bit of intention, guys, because you will have to think about, okay, my needs are like my shelter, my transportation, my food. I need that to fit within 50% of my budget. I can't just go crazy and say, oh, it's going to work itself out. So there is still some intention there. But if you put those very basic things in place, it kind of becomes like a no-brain game, because you can say like, my needs are going to be less than 50% of my income. I've taken care of the 20% saving for future me. So that 30% that's left, hey, I can spend that on what I want. When it's gone, no worries. There's no guilt on spending that because you allocated that for spending on any things that you wanted. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that style of budgeting. For me, it's almost like the detailed budgeting I'm doing right now is like having the training wheels on. I'm making sure that everything is in place. It's going the way it's supposed to. My wife and I are getting on the same page with how we spend. And then as we get better at this, we will graduate to something like the 50-30-20, where we can just kind of say, all right, we know generally how much we spend. This is where it's going to go. And it's very easy for us. So for now, we like the more detailed approach, but we want to graduate to something a little bit less intense as we go.
Yeah. And I think that hits on a key point, that your budget isn't this static thing that just lives in a spreadsheet. It's sort of like, it's as your life ebbs and flows, so does your money and the way you make decisions. And so like your budget you might set it up kind of detailed now, but then you move toward a place where it's like, man, we really got this routine down and we're continuing to save and invest money. So we're okay paring back and saying, let's just simplify it to these 3 buckets, right? And then eventually what I like to do, and our life is crazy right now. We move all over the place. So I haven't set this up in this way, but back like when we had a house, I just automated almost everything. So like all my bills were paid right at the beginning of the month, all of my investing, all my savings, everything auto transferred. And then the rest of the month was literally one single bucket that was just daily spending, like groceries and food and just your daily expenses. And so literally I could budget, in 5-10 minutes a month, and that was it. But I was budgeting and I knew what was happening, but it was all automated.
Yeah. And that's where you get to. And I would say it takes like 3 months to probably really figure out like what your routine spending kind of looks like. So usually about 90 days, and you can go backwards. You can do a little bit of detective work and see, okay, what have I been spending money on? But usually like from now till 90 days in the future, that's where you get that good picture of, now that I'm being intentional with my money, where do I really spend it? Where do I have to spend it? Where do I want to spend it? And then where's that savings going to go? And then you can kind of start, it gets a little bit easier. Like for my family, I think it's at the end of every month, it's probably a 10-minute conversation where we're like, is anything changing next month? Anything big we need to account for? No. Okay, let's copy over the same numbers. Let's do it again. And it's a very quick conversation. But speaking of, we we're talking about regular expenses. What happens if there is something irregular? So an emergency pops up that just suddenly requires an infusion of cash to be spent on something. You've got bills that maybe only come due once or twice a year. So an example for me would be like my HOA bill comes only once a year. Christmas happens once a year. Birthdays happen, several times a year, but they could all be like stacked in 1 month, or they could be evenly spread throughout the year. Like, how do you account for those things?
Yeah, totally. So I just call those things the budget busters, right? The things that pop up and they're just going to destroy your whole plan, and they're super frustrating. And so there's a couple of approaches that I like to do. One is you just got to have an emergency fund in place. I recommend to everybody I coach and teach as 1 month of expenses, period. Just have a month of expenses put away, because then if that emergency, your transmission goes out, some issue happens that pops up, you take care of it and you just kind of refill that bucket and you're good to go. It stops that like stress of, oh, well, my water heater just went out and I can't have hot water until I go find some money, and it helps you avoid debt. So having a month of expenses put away, first thing, is an amazing buffer between you and life. The other one is just most of these things you can kind of plan for. So things like car maintenance, vacations, Christmas, what these things are, and you can plan what they're actually going to cost or what you're going to spend on them. So just start saving for them in small amounts every month. I call them savings buckets. I know there's like some popular people that call them sinking funds. It's like a real estate term of like having money set aside for these known expenses that are not frequent, right? And so I open multiple savings accounts. I think I have 12 open, and they just all have their own names. And so paycheck comes in, 25 goes in here, 50 goes in that one, 50 goes in this one, right? So if I want to spend $1,200 on Christmas, right, for my family, my extended family, all the decorations, all that stuff, if I start in January, boom, you just put $100 a month away. So if you want to break it down even further, most people get paid, bi-weekly or twice a month. Every paycheck, you put $50 into that Christmas fund. And you can even automate that, right? Hit your checking account next day, auto transfer to your savings account, boom. So you're filling these little buckets. So if that HOA due comes up, Christmas comes up, that vacation you've always wanted to go to comes up, as it's coming up and you're starting to purchase for these things, the money is already there. You don't even have to think about it. And it's not this one-time ginormous expense that blows everything up. It's these small little incremental expenses that you save for.
Yeah, and another thing that we would put in there is in our budget every month, we put about $50, maybe $100 every month just towards unexpected expenses, miscellaneous spending that you just didn't account for. Because there's always something, guys. Like you can say like my budget is super predictable. I spend the same thing every month, but there is always something that's going to come up. And 1 month it'll be a birthday, the next month it'll be a Christmas, it'll be a unexpected wedding. Like it's just things will come up, and there will always be something every month. And just having that just allocation for, it could be anything. And if at the end of the month you haven't spent it, either you bank it for next month, or you say, well, if we don't spend it, pizza night, let's do it. And that's always a nice reward for my wife and I when we get to the end of like, if we didn't spend it, great, let's get some pizza, or let's get takeout or something like that. It can be a nice little reward for kind of like not blowing through all that money.
Totally.
So let's see so we mentioned you need a budget as a good app to use. Google Sheets is another great one. Are there any other apps or programs or systems that people can use for budgeting? Like, can you do it on pencil paper?
Yeah, you absolutely can. And that's where we started. I've done financial coaching, and my wife has sat down with me in a couple of those sessions. And way back in the day, that's what we did. We just said, in general, what are you making? Put that at the top, and let's just go down the line. So you can literally put your income at the top and say, what are my fixed expenses, right? My cell phone bill, my internet, my rent, whatever that is. And then what's the rest of my spending? And then you can see it right there on one sheet of paper. It doesn't have to be complicated. So there's a lot of people, and there's free printable stuff. There's so many free budget templates out there you can find. You just Google that and find one that you like. But you can do paper, pencil, Google Sheets. Again, I mentioned that app, You Need a Budget. And I think that has a monthly fee on it. I really like that one because you can do whatever you want in it and really start moving toward goals. There's a good free one out there called mint.com, and that one has been around. It's owned by the same people that own TurboTax, so it's like super safe and secure, and they've been around forever. And it's got really nice visual graphs. So if you're a visual learner, you can use Mint, and that one's free. And
Every
there's
every
one that
dollar is another free one.
yep. Yeah, there's one called Every Dollar, very nice visual, kind of color coded. Things look really, really good and simple. And then there's ones that are kind of keep popping up, but those are like the big popular ones that have really, really good support, and they're just great apps.
Okay, so love all those. Now let's say we're graduating from being an individual, so kind of like you were at 18, like you were on your own, you were responsible for all your finances, and then you met your significant other, or you're part of a family, and it could be different generations living in the home. Like there's more than one person involved. Does one person budget for the entire household, or should that be a collective effort?
Yeah, so this is how we set it up, and this has always worked for us, and this is what we teach as well. But it's you can have a budget meeting where you're goal setting, you're planning, you're saying, here's how our money should be spent for the month, and you work together on that. And then usually there's just one person that I say gravitates toward the spreadsheet, right? The one person that's like, you know what, I kind of want to just be a little more on top. Let me see the details. I'll record the expenses. I can kind of see what's happening. Or, if you use one of those apps, just the person, there's usually going to be one person that's checking that and one that's not. But the cool and the great thing about things like Google Sheets, you can share those together, and all those apps we mentioned, both people can see what's going on at all times, and get a gauge for what's going on. But like in our family, obviously I'm the budget nerd. That's what I do. So I'm way deep in the details, and then my wife and I sit down once a week, maybe every other week, and just talk about, okay, where we're at, what do we want to do? And especially with our life, we've got a lot of change always happening, right? We're traveling a ton, so it's like, okay, we're going to pivot over here. What do we need to do to make sure we have the funds available for that? But that's how we have it set up, and it works pretty well.
Okay, and what about kids? So I know you have three kids, very different ages. At what point do you start involving them in the money conversations of the household? I know it's kind of a little bit off topic, but it's sort of tied into the study of budgeting too. Like, when do they become part of the money plan or have a say in it?
Yeah, so I mean, a big thing for us is we've always communicated to our kids like they're adults. So we talk to them and give them responsibility and expect things from them, and we hear them out and we consider their conversation and their opinions and all that stuff. And so we've always kind of, I mean, we're not like super deep in the details, and obviously you don't want to stress your kids out if you're like struggling with money or something, but just having them be aware of what's going on. Here's how we're making decisions. Here's where we're moving toward. The day-to-day budget and the actual numbers we're not necessarily sharing, but the decisions and how we do that, and saying, you know what, we're not budgeting for this specific event or thing that we're doing. So we've had that conversation since my kids were 5, 6 years old. And then now we've got them doing extra tasks. So they earn we don't just like give them allowance, they earn their income. And then we put those in a couple of different buckets for saving and giving and spending. And then they can say, okay, I want to save up for this thing. And so they know what they need to do that. And so it's, for us, it's kind of ever evolving, but we've just always had open conversation about like how our family decisions go. And obviously the budget is part of that, and how we allocate our money toward the things that are important to us.
Very cool. So let's flip it now. Let's say that we're talking to the kids who are listening. So if you are under 18, you're still living at home, and maybe you haven't had these money conversations with family before, like how would you approach that? What would you ask? What would you say is kind of like a good place to start?
You're saying for the
So yeah,
students are watching this.
I'm a 16-year-old at home. I really don't know anything about the finances of my own household. Is there a way to approach that conversation, in your opinion, that would kind of yield good results and kind of get you involved? And you don't have to make any decisions. Like at the end of the day, it's not your income, it's your parents' income probably, unless you're contributing to the finances of the house. But what's a way that we could get involved and maybe be helpful, or at least be a good observer, learning from how they're making decisions?
Well, I think that's the key is not coming in and making any kind of demands or judgments on what's happening, but coming in with curiosity and saying, like, I'm legit curious, like how do we make decisions in our family around like what we do with our money? Like what are kind of the priorities? Just ask open-ended questions of, how did we decide to live where we're at, and how does that money work, and like and the hard let's say the hard part is there's going to be a lot of home situations where it's like, that's an off-topic conversation, right? That's just an unfortunate place where a lot of families are, and like I get that. I was part of that. Like that's happened to a ton of people. So it's not necessarily like a fun idea to think, oh, let me go ask my parents about their money, the thing they're always stressed about, right? But if it's from a heart of curiosity, it can really help them, because this is what will happen too, is as they explain what it is and why it is they're doing the things they're doing, it might open up some really, really good conversations. Even if at some point they're like, yeah, that's not really a conversation for you, maybe to get them thinking and help them explain more to you. And you can, I think the thing is, say, I'm curious and I want to learn, right? If you approach it with that heart, it's not, you're not going to get too much pushback, or you shouldn't. It's, oh wow, they want it, it's part of you becoming an adult, is like learning how is the household managed and the money managed, and like how do you make these adult decisions. So that would be my advice, is just a heart of curiosity, and again, not judging or blaming, but just how does this work.
Yeah, and usually if you phrase the question as I'm interested in your experience and your opinion, your advice, people are
Yep.
much more forthcoming with it. So say like you watch this video and you go home and you say, hey, I watched this video today. They were talking about budgeting. Really curious, what do you guys do when it comes to managing the finance of the house? Like, do you guys have a plan for what happens, or do you kind of just wing it as it goes? Like, just leave it open-ended and say, like, I'm curious. I'm thinking about starting to manage my own money. What do you guys do? And see what you get. Like, you might get a total shutdown. Like, no, we don't talk about that. Or you might start opening up these doors. I know that's a conversation that I've had to very gently have with my own parents. And even still, I'm prying open those doors to try and just learn a little bit more about how their financial situation looks and what they've done, and learn from the good things they've done and the mistakes they've made as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
So let's say now that, again, going back to being a teen of some sort, I want to learn to start budgeting, but I don't really make any money. So I don't really have money to budget. I don't really spend that much either. How do I learn these skills before I get to a point where I am making some, like, we'll call it serious money, adult money, and not totally mess it up?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the key is, all you're doing when you're doing a budget, is you're saying, how much do I make? What are my required sort of fixed expenses for the month? And then what are my required just regular daily spending expenses? And if you just think about those three main things, like, okay, what do I make total and what am I responsible for? Um, then you can really just write down what's, where's my money going? What does it need to go to? Maybe I'm not paying rent, right? Maybe I'm not buying the food for the household, but I do buy food when I'm out, or I've got to pay my own car insurance or my cell phone bill, right? So all you're doing, and it might literally just be like a 6-line item budget, but like, here's my total income. Here are the expenses that I pay every month. What's left over? That left over is the most key amount in the whole budget, because that is what moves you toward your goals. It allows you to save, it allows you to invest, work toward things. And then as you add responsibility into your life, as you move out, okay, what does that look like? Because here's the key: at some point, you will have more expenses. You are going to look at moving out, or buying a house, or making some of these big decisions. Well, if you're already in the practice of at least knowing what's coming in and what's going out, all you have to do is now, let me create this mock-up budget. Okay, I've got what I normally make and what I normally spend, but let's add in rent and then first and last month's deposit. Can I do this? Right? The budget will give you the answer right away. Right? If you don't have enough money, or you don't make enough, you're like, okay, I need to make X dollars an hour before I can move out. So starting now is great, even if it feels inconsequential, right? It might feel like, okay, great. Like, this is like, I don't really have many expenses, and I'm just mostly focused on school or working toward college. But just having those basics down, then as you make big money decisions in the future, you're going to have the format, you're going to know what's going on. And it won't be you won't be just jumping and hoping you land. You're going to know exactly what you need and where you can get to. So I think it's good to start now. And then especially, like I was saying, that bottom number at the bottom of how much can I save per month? If you can start locking that in and saying, I won't move out unless I can save at least 20% of my income, or I won't go buy a house unless I can continue to save 20 to 30% of my income or more, right? If you can start building that habit and saying, this savings is non-negotiable, man, it's going to change the trajectory of your whole life if you can build that habit.
Yeah, if you can just lob that savings amount off the top of your paycheck and say, you know what, that money doesn't exist. That is, it's off the cards in terms of something that I am allowed to spend. Yeah, your whole trajectory of how you build wealth will change. It becomes so easy because you're like, well, this 20% or whatever number you pick is already going in there. I don't really have to do much deep thought about it. A couple other things you can try, guys. Look for things that you can practice budgeting on in your own life. So one example I love to do with my students is practice budgeting your time. So you've got a fixed income of 24 hours in a day. Your needs are your sleep, your homework, your part-time job, any other different chores maybe you have to do. So you pencil those in and you allocate minutes to those, like how long is it going to take you to do that? And then the space in between is your discretionary income, what's left over. And then you get to kind of allocate that as you will. So you're going to do something fun with it. Are you going to do something productive? Like you're going to maybe learn a new skill. You're going to get another part-time job. Like you can decide, but you just get in that habit. Yeah. Of like, where is everything going? What am I doing? And you often unlock some great sources of wasted time in your time budget, if you will, that you can put to better use. So it is a good exercise for a lot of you students to try as well. Look at the games you play. Monopoly is a great one for just tracking income and expenses. So every time you make money, track it. Every time money goes out, track it. And your balance, so what's left over, should always match the cash you have. Do you play any video games that have some sort of income and expense going on inside of them? Track it. See, okay, how much am I making? How much am I spending? Do I need to spend a certain amount to get a new item I need or to level up or whatever it is, and start saving for those goals in some way? Like just practice. It's a little over the top in terms of playing the game, but it's a scenario where you can actually practice your budgeting skills. All right. Is there any other advice you want to give us about budgeting or managing money in general?
I would just say the key to the whole thing is you can't think about budgeting in terms of what can I not have. You got to think about it as how can I unlock the future that I want, right? You're allocating fixed amounts to what you're allowed to spend in certain areas. Like you're creating a plan and a goal and you're working towards something. So maybe that's just, I want to move out someday, or I want to buy my own house. Eventually it's going to be, well, maybe I want to get married, or I want to buy this new car, or I want to start investing a ton so I can retire early, or I want to start a business, right? Think of those things that are immediately in front of you and then some of those further out goals, and realize that all you're doing is allocating money to make sure you actually get there instead of just dreaming about it for the next 40 years, right? That would be the worst thing, is to know that you want to get somewhere, but not make a plan to actually make it a reality. And so that budget is just a simple tool, right? It's just a tool. It's not the thing that does it. You got to do the work, make the decisions, and work toward those goals. But it is the best tool to help give you clarity on where you're going. And I think another key thing, and I do this again with my coaching clients, is don't make a budget that you can't stick to. So eventually, like, you get a job and you're like, I want to save as much money as possible. Well, don't make a budget that's unrealistic, where there's no fun money, right? There's no guilt-free spending. And maybe you're just like, you're not actually spending money on things you care about, right? Maybe you care about health, but you're like, I won't spend money on gym or good food or anything. It's like, well, no, if that's important to you, put it in there. Like, put things in your budget that you're like, man, I love spending this money every month, right? Ask yourself, like, what do I love spending money on? Put it in the dang budget and do it. Because otherwise it is going to be dry and lame and you're going to hate it. So put in the things that you really, really love and enjoy, but don't compromise on your goals.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic advice, and something that I've certainly started doing. My wife and I made a list of the top 10 things that we value the most that, cost money. And we kept things like coffee dates in there. So like, that's where we go for, a special time for ourselves. And yes, we go to Starbucks, which is probably the most expensive coffee in the world, but we really enjoy what we get out of it. And the experience is worth the $10 or whatever it is to us each time we go. Going out to eat, it's not something that's the most cost-effective way to have food, but hey, we like doing it. But we make the decision as well that we're going to go to like a mid-tier restaurant, or we're going to get takeout, something that's not $100 a plate kind of food. So you make these decisions about what you value, and then things that you don't care about, you do cut out. So like, I'm trying to think of something that we don't really care that much about. I would say probably like stuff. Like most of the stuff in our house, clothing, it's either from thrift stores or secondhand. It's off Facebook Marketplace. It's off eBay. Like, we don't buy a lot of new stuff for our house. Like, most of the things you see around me are all from very discount stores. They're off of Facebook Marketplace. Like, they're all low cost items. And that's the sacrifice, if we want to call it, that we made, the trade-off, I would say, not even sacrifice. We just like, we don't care that much about it, so we're not going to spend a lot on it. And that's just the way you manage it. Like, our cars are another example. We both have older, low price cars, and we don't care about having expensive or flashy cars. So yeah, you make trade-offs based on the things that you care about. So you keep the things you want, you drop or you reduce the things you don't care about, and it leads for a happy life and a plan for the future.
Spot on. That's it. And I would say bottom line is as you're going through these exercises, just also don't spend money you don't have, right? Don't, especially like, I know at least when I was 18 or when smartphones first came out, I'm like, I'm on it, right? But now that smartphones cost as much as a Honda Civic, like let's make sure that you, again, use that savings bucket strategy, put the money aside and you go and stand in line, you grab that dang phone, you get the AirPods with it because the money's already there. But don't spend money you don't have to acquire this thing that you want right now. Like it's just a small, let me be a little more proactive about this, plan ahead. And I can still end up in the same place I want to, but without debt and with guilt-free spending on the thing I really, really, really wanted, right? So save for the things, spend money you have, not money you don't.
Awesome. All right. So on that note, how can people find out more about you or check up on this iHeart Budgets thing? Like where can they find you?
Yeah, so iHeartBudgets.net's the site. It's been around since 2012. Been rocking that, and then we're pretty active on Instagram. We post every day, so just at iHeartBudgets, and we post about our travels and just budget tips and money mindset and all kinds of great stuff on there as well. So it's probably the best places to find us.
All right, Jacob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.